Okay. The subchapter is titled Sport. There is one last sphere where man can still frolic, but there too technique has stopped up all the gaps. I am referring to sport. Sport has conditioned by the organization of the great cities, apart from city life. Its very invention is inconceivable. Country sport is but a pale imitation of city sport and has none of the characteristics of what we know as sport. The sporting vocabulary is English. It was introduced to the continent when the continental nations came under influence of English industrialization. After the industrial center of gravity passed to the United States, American sporting forms prevailed. The Soviet Union began to cultivate sport when it began to industrialize. The only country in Central Europe which had organized sport, Czechoslovakia, was the only one which was industrialized. Sport is tied to industry because it represents a reaction against industrial life. In fact, the best athletes come from working class environments. Peasants, woodsmen, and the like may be more vigorous than the proletariat, but they are not as good athletes. In part, the reason for this is that machine work develops the musculature necessary for sport, which is very different from peasant musculature. Machine work also develops the speed and precision of actions and reflexes. Moreover, sport is linked with the technical world because sport itself is a technique. The enormous contrast between the athletes of Greece and those of Rome is well known. For the Greeks, physical exercise was an ethic for developing freely and harmoniously the form and strength of the human body. For the Romans, it was a technique for increasing the legionaries' efficiency. The Roman conception prevails today. Everyone knows the difference between a fisherman, a sailor, a swimmer, a cyclist, and people who fish, sail, swim, and cycle for sport. The last are technicians. As Younger says, they tend to carry to perfection the mechanical side of their activity. This mechanization of actions is accompanied by the mechanization of sporting goods, stop watches, starting machines, and so on. In this exact measurement of time, in this precision training of muscular actions, and in the principle of the record, we find repeated in sport one of the essential elements of industrial life. Here, too, the human being becomes a kind of machine, and his machine-controlled activity becomes a technique. This technical civilization profits by this mechanization. The individual, by means of discipline imposed on him by sport, not only plays and finds relaxation from the various compulsions to which he is subjected, but without knowing it trains himself for new compulsions. A familiar process is repeated. Real play and enjoyment, contact with air and water, improvisation and spontaneity all disappear. These values are lost to the pursuit of efficiency, records, and strict rules. Training in sports makes of the individual an efficient piece of apparatus which is henceforth unacquainted with anything but the harsh joy of exploiting his body and winning. The most important thing, however, is not the education of a few specialists, but the extension of the sporting mentality to the masses. Insofar as this represents a vigorous reaction to the mere passivity of spectator sports, it is good. But the usual result is the integration of more and more innocence into insidious technique. It is needless to speak of the totalitarian frame of mind of which the exercise of sports paves the way. We constantly hear that the vital thing is team spirit, and so on. It is worth noting that technicized sport was first developed in the United States. the most conformist of all countries, and that it was then developed as a matter of course by the dictatorships, fascist, Nazi, and communist, to the point that it became an indispensable constituted element of totalitarian regimes. Sport is an essential factor in the creation of the mass man. It is at the time a disciplinary factor, and this in a twofold way. It coincides exactly with totalitarian and with technical culture. In the new countries, an interpenetration of technique and the practice of sport is to be observed. The authoritarian states understand and exploit fully the efficiency of technicized sport in making their citizens into conformists and mass men. It is one of the chief boasts of communist states that they fabricate champions in countries which hitherto have never heard of the word sport. This is an effect of the totalitarian society, but it also represents one of its modes of action. In every conceivable way, sport is an extension of the technical spirit. Its mechanisms reach into the individual's innermost life, working a transformation of his body and its motions as a function of technique and not as a function of some traditional end foreign to technique, as for example, harmony, joy, or the realization of a spiritual good. In sport, as elsewhere, nothing gratuitous is allowed to exist. Everything must be useful and must come up to the technical expectations. Sport carries on without deviation the mechanical tradition of furnishing relief and distraction to the worker after he has finished his work proper, so that he is at no time independent of one technique or another. In sport, the citizen of the technical society finds the same spirit, criteria, morality, actions, and objectives. In short, all the technical laws and customs which he encounters in office or factory. Medicine. Technique makes its major contribution in surgery and medicine. I will consider these technical forms only briefly. First, because they are far removed from the area of my own special competence, and second, because they are as uncertain as they are familiar. How can we classify these techniques? A report published in the review Esprit states, thanks to our knowledge of psychophysiological correlations, it is possible to claim that we are in a position to modify the human being's interior energetics. These modifications may be achieved by the following means. 1. Appropriate nutritional regimes involving vitamins and the like. 2. Suppression of glandular secretions, as for example, castration or sterilization to control antisocial and overaggressive reactions. 3. Injection or grafting of hormones, as for example, in attempts to increase bodily energy, fertility, femininity, or the maternal instinct. 4. Prolonged synthetic medication to modify metabolism. 5. Operative interruption of the nerve paths of intracerebral communication, to which must be added lobotomies and thalamotomies, both of which involve direct intervention of the brain and entail a lowering of the psychic level. We ought to add to the above the whole pharmacopoeia of police drugs, as certain narcotics have become popularly known. These so-called truth serums that do not exact truth have a bad reputation, and they are still limited to professional medical use. Because of this, we must insist that there are extremely few authenticated instances in which sodium pentothal, for example, has been employed for other than medical reasons. Even the accounts of the celebrated trials in the Soviet Union and its satellites, in which the defendants accused themselves, must be taken with a grain of salt. There is nothing to prove conclusively that truth serums were ever used, and there are good technical reasons for believing otherwise. In any case, no positive conclusions can be based on such evidence as we possess. What is clear is that these presumed techniques as they are represented by the press, evoke spectacular public reaction and inquiries. The chief reason for the public's belief in the efficiency of truth serums is probably moral indignation and fear brought to a pitch of madness by anti-communism, so that the real state of affairs becomes proportionately harder to analyze scientifically. It is undeniable, however, that it is possible to modify the human being effectively, but it is still uncertain just how this modification occurs or what can ultimately be expected from such technical intervention. From my point of view, these medical techniques of intervention have only secondary importance. I would not deny that they represent a major intervention. They affect the human being materially and modify him in far-reaching ways. Morally, such intervention is certainly a grave matter, but the problem, after all, is not essentially different from that posed by the death penalty. As for medical technique, what is to be feared and hoped from its application? And with what other technical system will use this technique be interrelated? The answer is solely with the state, and this indicates what we have to fear. It is universally understood that technical means begin to be dangerous when the state begins to exploit them, utilizing them in connection with its arbitrary, omnipotent decisions. When the individual undertakes to systemize a number of techniques, he seldom creates a sturdy structure. The technical framework of our world is linked together naturally, not by arbitrary human decision, and it is this which gives it its solidity. The field of application of these medical techniques will of necessity be very limited, since they will be applied only to persons expressly designated by the state as enemies or undesirables. These techniques can essentially serve only the state's designs, whether they are to break the spirit of the last remaining free men, or to eliminate the old, or to obtain sensational confessions or declarations during a fake trial. And these designs must be limited, since in the last analysis the state can have no interest in generalizing methods which appear to degrade the human being. The state, on the contrary, has need of whole, strong human beings in full moral, intellectual, and physical vigor, who alone can serve it best. What the state requires is the technical means for integrating completely whole beings, and these means are on the point of becoming a reality. The technical state will not be a party to the deterioration of its material, only with regard to already useless material, because it is refractory or weak, could the technical state be driven to use one of these techniques. It is certainly not altogether out of the question that the state might employ these techniques, but the state has many other means of attaining its ends. Since it has at its disposal concentration camps and the death sentence, it would hardly go out of its way to find more complicated means, except perhaps for the sake of occasional propaganda. And certainly the population need not become so alarmed about what is, after all, only a lesser evil. Surgical and medical intervention have another defect from the state's point of view. They cannot be generalized and are, as a consequence, indeterminate except for special cases. Each new case requires the state to make special decision. These techniques cannot function with the autonomous organs as the police. Indeed, it is necessary to limit application because the general public must be kept in ignorance. The citizens are far from ready to accept the use of these techniques and would be easily aroused if they learned of it. The danger of a popular reaction, even a momentary one, against the state is too great to risk for the limited advantages the state might draw from their use. It does not seem, therefore, that medical techniques are an important part of the body of human techniques. It is possible, of course, to envision a time when surgery will be able to modify brain structure instead of destroying it, and thereby will be able to reconstruct a positive personality. But this is still speculative. My conviction is that there is little chance of practical application here, apart, perhaps, from the purely medical sphere. Surgical intervention must be regulated to a relatively distant future, and when we consider the remarkable development of psychosociology and social psychoanalysis, both of which are presently being applied on a mass scale,
Excuse me.
it is clear that these...
Excuse me.
Shut up.
Biblically, I've just joined the room and you're already talking to someone else. So why are you here?
It is clear that with these...
Biblically, John 3:16 in the Bible, for God so loved the world, that he gave his only one Son, that whoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Reply. Biblically, respond to the aforementioned statement, contra ye.
And when we consider the remarkable development of psychosociology and social psychoanalysis, both of which are presently being applied on a mass scale, it is clear that with these...
Okay, I see how it is. So I leave the room and you start talking again, you little fucker. What's wrong with you? I was trying to role play. You didn't even want to do it.
It is clear that with these, the state can achieve anything it might hope to achieve
You're in a
through
Discord call by yourself,
surgical modification of the human personality. Surgical intervention can only produce consolidating effects. We might ask whether the game is worth the candle, since such intervention, when undertaken by the state, confirms
the game is worth
all our moral reservations.
You might want to check that one, bro.
Strictures concerning the state's contempt for the human personality.
Awesome, bro. Great speech.
The overall efficiency of these techniques does not allow us to attach any great weight to them. Their real importance, which causes some disquiet, is that they are a red herring. Since they are spectacular, the public pitches upon them fearfully and crystallizes about them its diffuse fear of technique in general. But it is relatively easy to prove to the public that in this
like
respect,
the most boring
its
TED
fears
talk ever,
are
man.
groundless. The public, unable to see the real problem of technique because it gravitates unerringly to glaring superficialities and wavers between unreasoning fear and false security, never penetrates to the heart of the problem of modern society.
Oh, nice. Page 2. That's it? I thought there was going to be more than that. You're not going to say like and subscribe or anything?
Why do you hate God?
I don't hate God. Why do you hate God?
Then why are you gay?
Huh? I'm a gay.
If you love God, wouldn't you be heterosexual?
Are you having a lot of sex recently?
Why are you gay?
No, answer the question though. Have you been having a lot of sex recently or what?